Hello everyone, in this video we're going to have a look at loops, and we're going to look at only the for loop for now, not the while loop. Right, so a loop, what's a loop? If I just go briefly over the introduction of a loop is a certain block of code that you want to like recursively run, if that makes sense. I mean, you want to repeatedly run, you want to like make it call again and again and again. So meaning if I were to print something, cout 5, okay, now if I say 5, I want to print 5, but now instead of say I want to, let me just run this by the way. Okay, so we have 5 here. Alright, so you can see it prints out 1 5. Assume I wanted to fill that entire black box or that black screen with 5s. How would I do that? Or the entire, not the entire screen, but like from the left till the right. So from here till the end over here, I want to print out 5s. Okay, this is a really simple example. So the in real life examples is actually more complex, reasonable and like logical reasons to use a loop, but just for simplicity I'm going to show you what a loop is. Alright, so I can of course go ahead and copy this, copy paste. So I'll just copy paste, and I can keep going until I damage my keyboard, until the end, and I can do that. But in real life you don't actually know how many times the code has to run. Here I can actually determine, but of course if I were to increase the size, then you can see that the screen gets bigger. So in real life you want to have some logic that shows that if you want to increase the size, then maybe put a certain number of loops depending on the screen size. You have an if statement saying that. Alright, so you'd actually use a loop instead of actually manually putting in the code in an if statement. So you can actually use a loop. So what we would do is, instead of printing this separately, we would just print one cout, but we will put it inside a loop. So we're going to nest this block of code in a loop so that it runs continuously. And we want it, there's two types of loops in C++. Actually not in only C++, I mean in any language pretty much there's two types of loops. One is a loop you use when loop you use when you know how many repetitions or iterations. The correct word to use for a repetition in a loop is an iteration. So how many iterations, right, iterations. And then you have another kind of loop when you don't know how many iterations. So there's one where okay, when you know, and when you don't know how many iterations, meaning how many times the code has to run. That's when you use a certain loop. And when you don't know how much times the loop will run, but you want it to run based on a certain condition, then you'd use another loop. So when you know how many times the loop wants to run, you use a for loop. It's called the for loop. When you don't know, you use a while loop. So quick example, you have this window right here, this dev C++ window that's opened up. This is actually a loop, right? Like deep in the system, whoever designed this Windows operating system or this app, the dev C++ app, which I have open right now in front of me, alright, whoever designed it has put whatever code you see over here, these functions, the code for all of these functions and everything, has put it inside a loop, so it loops continuously. But that guy who coded this problem or this app, he didn't know when we will press X and we will close this window. So he didn't know that. So what I am assuming he used is not a for loop. He used a while loop. Now a while loop terminates based on a condition. So his condition would be that when I press X, then you must terminate the program. So that's what this is. Actually, you know, when you go into graphical user interfaces, programming them using libraries, right, you would actually code this, you know, when you actually, you know, you'd have a code, separate code saying that when you press X, then you must terminate the loop. Alright, so that's what it is. Now I'm just going to go into for loop. I'm going to show you a for loop. So we want to print this 5 until the end of the line. So the way to do it is using a for loop. Now the syntax in C++ for a for loop is like this: for int I, and by the way, we're only going to look at for loops in this video to keep it short and simple. Okay, you're going to say for, and you're going to have open brackets. And now in the open brackets, the first parameter, you're going to have 3 parameters, alright? And each parameter is separated by a semicolon. So you have one parameter here, you have another parameter there, and you have another parameter here. Alright, and then you're going to have, just like within an if statement, you're going to have a block of code that you put inside of this for loop, which is like this. Okay, so we're going to put the cout 5 in that for loop. Now in the first parameter, you're going to have an integer, or you're going to have a variable called I equal 0. What I equals 0 means is that we're going to start I with 0. Okay, that's the variable, and then we're going to have in the second parameter a criteria, which would be I is this, by the way, is going to tell us when our loop is going to run, how long or how many times it's going to run. So we want our loop to run, say, 10 times. Now the way to do this is we're going to say I is greater than 11. So this, when this evaluates to be true, then our loop is not, it's going to stop. Okay, let's just keep it simple. Let's just do 2. Alright, 2. So when our loop reaches, when our I reaches 2, alright, I is equal to 2, then this loop is not going to run. Okay, so then in the third one, we're going to actually press I plus plus, meaning we're going to increment I. So cout 5. Now the way, now let me just run and show how this works, by the way. Why doesn't this work? I think I haven't compiled it. Compile and run. Why isn't this working? Cout 5 int main. I don't see an error. Oh, I think it's not running because actually this should have been that way. Sorry. Okay, there you can see it runs. So it prints out 5 5. So it prints out 5 2 times. So this actually was a mistake. Int I equals 0. So the condition would be you're gonna run this loop until I is less than 2. Right? Not until, but while I is less than 2, you're gonna run the loop. So we made I 0 first, and then we tell the loop that if I is less than 2, then you're going to run this loop. Okay, and then we're gonna increase I by 1 every time. So if I actually cout I, you're gonna see that I is increasing. I'm gonna put an end L right there, so it prints on a new line. Okay, so if I run now, you're gonna see that I is first 0, and then I is 1, and then so it runs the loop twice. Okay, so for when I is equal to 0, then it's gonna come here, it's gonna read this line, which is cout I, so then it does that, and then it's gonna end it's gonna come to the end of the for loop block, and then once that's done, then it's gonna increment I and go back up. So now I is equal to 1 now. Okay, and then I is 1, I equal 1. Okay, first I was equal to 0, then it won that, it printed it out, and then it ended the loop and it made I plus plus. Okay, so it incremented I. Now I is no longer 0, I is actually equal to 1, and then it comes back into this and it's gonna print it out again, and then it's gonna I plus plus. So now I is equal to 2 now, because remember I was 1, and now it incremented this and I is equal to 2. So it's going to come back up to 2 and it's going to keep checking this condition. I is less than 2. Alright, so I is actually not less than 2. I is 2 now, so it's going to say okay and done. So done. Okay, so it's not going to run. It's only going to run twice. So that's what the for loop essentially is. And just for our previous example, you know, cout 5, we're going to say that we're going to run the loop 10 times. Actually, it's not a good example. Let me just print cout I. Alright, I is actually 10, so less than 10. So let's see how many times it's going to run the loop. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can actually make this 1, and we can make this actually less than 11, so it prints out the first 10 digits. And I'm going to put an end L here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, and a helpful tip right here. Okay, if you guys just don't know, you know, sometimes beginners, they have this problem where they don't know how many times the loop is going to run. A quick way is to, if you have this equal to here, int I equal to, okay, this number right here, and this one where if this is equal to that, you're not going to follow this rule. But if it's not equal to, okay, so if it's greater than or if it's less than or something like that, then what you, if if this is I is less than 11 and you have I equal to 1 initialized to 1, then what you're going to do is you're going to say 11 minus 1, so meaning 11 minus 1, which is 10, of course. So the loop is going to run 10 times. You can see it ran 10 times from 1 till 10. So that's just a helpful way. So if I were to come here and I'm going to say like a 151, right, and now I'm going to run this loop 151 times. So how many like numbers it's going to print? So if the first one would be 1, and how many times will it run? Well, you can just do 151 minus 1, which is equal to 150, of course. So we just run this now, and you will see that the last number is actually 150 right there. So that's just a quick way of doing it, quick helpful way. And by the way, you can have any condition right here. You can have a not equal to, so if we run that, you're going to see it's the exact same thing. See, it prints out till 150. You can have smaller than equal to sign. Now in this case, you're not going to follow the rule. What's going to happen is that it's going to run one extra, so the last number would be 152. So if I run that, you're going to see that it's actually 150. Actually no, 151, sorry, that's the last number, not 152 and not 150. So that's what it is. And yeah, that's just pretty much the loop. And now another thing about the loop is that I want to show you that you can actually omit this. Okay, so we're going to go back to 11 and just make that erased. So you can omit the second parameter, but if you actually do that, then you know the loop is going to be an infinite loop, because I is 1 and you know I isn't getting increased. So I would suggest that if you do that, if you have a situation like that, then where you don't have a third parameter, then put I here. Okay, so if I were to, okay, it doesn't work. I think just do it like that and check if that works. Yes, it works. Okay, so that's what it is. You can put I down there also, but I suggest you put it up here, convention. Alright, and then that's what it is. And the other thing is also, you don't need to put int I here. You can put int I also outside, but don't forget the semicolon, and then you have I is smaller than 11, and if you run, it's going to give you the exact same result. Okay, it doesn't actually give you the exact same result. Why is that? Of course, it's because I didn't increment I. So I plus plus, and you can see it gives you the exact same result. Okay, and then of course, if you don't have int I, and you even don't have this one, you just have a for loop like that, then you have no condition, you have no variable, you have no increment, decrement. Then what's going to happen? Of course, it's going to be an infinite loop. So we can just go ahead and try that. It actually gives us an error. Okay, but we're going to put a 5 like that, and we're going to put this like that. So let's just run this code and see what happens. Of course, it's an infinite loop. So we achieved what we wanted. This is how we wanted to achieve it, we wanted to print 5s all over the screen, and we would not go manually see out, see out, see out, see out, see out. We're just gonna go and use a loop. It decreases the number of lines, but it does a good job. Alright, so that's what it is. Thanks for watching.